Good morning, our students, and welcome to this morning's class. Today, we want to equally discuss with you another very important topic in statistics and economics called index number. Index numbers. Index numbers. So, the concern here is what is an index number? What does index number help people to do or help government to do? Index number, of course, is defined as a statistical measure that tells us the percentage changes in a variable or group of related variables in terms of either the price, the quantity, or the volume over a given period of time. I repeat, an index number is defined as a statistical measure. It tells us the percentage changes in a variable or group of related variables in terms of either the price of the variables, the quantity or the volumes of variables over a period of time or at different time point in what in time. That's what we call an index number. Going by this definition, of course, we can identify something that there are two key points in times that are of concern here. What we call the base time and what we call the given or the current what time. When we talk about what the base time, it can equally be called the base year. So we have two important time points here, and those two important time points are: number one, we talk about what we call the base time. What we call the base time. Some people can call this base time base year. What we call base year. Have base year. And then what we call the current time, number two, what we call the current time. Some people equally can call this current time what is called given time or given period. Given time. Of course, it will not be confusing when somebody going through the pages of a textbook or magazine begins to see where people are talking about base period or what we call the base year. They mean the same thing. So you can equally see where they are talking about what they call the base period instead of talking about time. And as well, you can see them talking about what given period. Given period. So in the study of index time, all these parameters mean the same thing. One can say base time, another can say base year, and another can say base period. They are making reference to the same thing. You can equally talk about the current time, the given time, or the given period. You are equally making reference to a particular thing. And then in the calculation of an index time, we are going to make what we call references, or what we call a reference. In the calculation of what of an index time, this base time or base year is chosen to be the reference time or the reference what year. So I have what is called the base time here. This base time or year. In the calculation of an index time, it is always chosen to be what we call the reference. The reference time or the reference year. And because it is chosen to be the reference time or the reference year, an index value of 100% is always assigned to it. An index value of 100% is often assigned to this reference year, which of course is always chosen to be the base year. That's what we can tell you about the definition of an index what number. There are different types of an index number that is categorized in terms of what changes that they measure, or whether the index time or the index what number is weighted or unweighted index number. Permit me to clean and explain what I mean by this. I said earlier that we have different kinds of an index number. And these different kinds of index number are identified in terms of one, the kind of changes that they measure. One, the kind of changes that they measure. One, the kind of changes. The kind of changes that they measure. And then number two, whether the index number is weighted or unweighted. So we call it in terms of weight. In terms of what? Weight. In terms of weight. Okay, let us look at the different kinds of index number which we have in terms of the changes that they measure. So going by the first one, which is talking about the kind of changes they measure, we have the following types or kinds of index numbers. Changes, kinds of changes that they measure. Kinds of changes that they measure. If you come under this type, you have number one, what we call price index. What we call price index. Price index. Number two, we have what we call quantity index. Quantity index, which at times some persons can call volume index, but preferably we use the word quantity index. And then number three, we have what we call value index number. This is price index number, quantity index number, and then we have what we call value index number. And then number four, we have what we call special purpose index number. Special purpose index number. As a quick recap, when we explain the meaning of an index number, we talked about the base and then the given what periods or times. We now say that we have different kinds of index number, and these different kinds of index number can be identified in terms of the particular changes that they measure, or whether the index number is weighted or whether it is unweighted. And we are saying that in terms of the kind of changes that they measure, that we have the following kinds of index number. One, we have the price index number, we have the quantity index number, we have the value index number, and we have the special purpose index number. So we want to identify the types of index number we have in terms of weight. So when we talk about in terms of weight, in terms of weight, in terms of weight, we are going to have number one, what we call unweighted, unweighted, unweighted index number. This unweighted index number can equally be called simple index number. Simple index number. Simple index number. And then we have what we call number two, weighted index number. Weighted index number. Weighted index number. They are what we call weighted index number. We are equally going to look at the different kinds of index number that exist under unweighted and different kinds of index number that exist under weighted. So first of all, permit me to clean here while we call up this unweighted index number and discuss it on the board. So we have unweighted index number, unweighted index number, unweighted index number. Index number. And do remember that we say that this unweighted index number can equally be called simple index number. So we can equally call it simple index number. Index number. Let us narrow down our discussion in terms of price alone so that you hear us talking about simple price index number, simple price relative, and the rest of them. Let us narrow it down now to price. Then under this unweighted index number, we are going to have number one. And that number one is what we call price relatives. Price what? Relative. Price relative. Okay? The abbreviation that you usually see in a textbook when they talk about price relative is PR. So when they talk about PR, they are talking about what? Price relative. And then the mathematical expression for the price relative is always given as this, that the price relative P of what R is given as P subscript n all over P subscript 0 multiplied by 100 over 1. The question becomes, what are we calling P subscript n? What are we calling P subscript 0? We now say where P subscript n is the price of the commodity in the given year. Price of the commodity in the given year. Price of the commodity in the given year. Given year. And then our P of 0 is price of the commodity in the base year. Price of the commodity in the base year. Price of the what? Commodity in the base year. That is to say that we might have the knowledge that the price of a chewing gum in 2000 is 10 naira. And then the price of chewing gum in 2025 becomes, say, 50 naira. 50 naira is what we refer to as P subscript n, being the price of the chewing gum in the given year, 2025. And then the base year in this context, we are making reference to 2000 when it was sold for 10 naira. So our P subscript 0 is 10 naira in this illustration, and our P subscript n is 50 naira in this illustration. That's what we refer to this. It is called price relative. Then number two existing under the unweighted price index. The unweighted price index. Number two existing there is what we call the simple aggregate price index. Simple aggregate price index. Simple aggregates. Aggregate price index. And we have to pay attention here so that we can see the difference. Of course, the abbreviation that they usually use for this simple aggregate price index is what? SAPI, which people usually call SAPI. Okay? So, how is it different? How is it different from the price relative? The use of the word aggregates implies that we are considering the price of more than one commodity. Aggregating something means totaling something or summing something. So we are no longer discussing only one item. We are discussing the prices of a different what items. And in that case, the formula for the simple aggregate price index becomes that this is given as sum over I of P of N I all over sum over what I of P of 0 I multiplied by 100 over 1. We are not going to be confused with n subscript I here. I here might become 1, talking about price of chewing gum. I might become 2, talking about price of a particular sweet. I might become 3, talking about price of a particular what? Biscuit. So that's what we mean by this I here. I can be 2 here, I can be 3 here, I can be 4. But I can never be 1. If I becomes 1, the use of aggregate here becomes wrong, and we revert back to what we call the price relative, where interest is on one particular commodity. Here, the interest has gone beyond one particular commodity. And that's the reason why you see us talking about what? Sum of all the prices of these commodities in the given year, all over the sum of the price of all the commodities in the base year multiplied by 100 over 1. That will give you what we call the simple aggregate price relative. In terms of more emphasis, let us now consider chewing gum and consider sweet in 2000. The price of chewing gum might be 10, like I earlier had said, in 2000, and let the price of sweet be 15 naira in 2000. Now, in 2025 now, the price of what chewing gum has gone up to 50, and the price of sweet has gone up to 75. So if you are talking about sum of P subscript Ni, you are talking about summing the price of these commodities of interest in this year 2025, which becomes 50 plus 75 naira. Is now going to give you 125 naira. Then if you now talk about the base year, you are going to talk about 10 naira plus 15 naira, which gives you now 25 naira. So that is actually what we are talking about this, and it is called simple aggregate price relative. Then when we talk about the number 3 here is talking about what we call the simple average price relative. Simple average price relative. Simple price or simple average price relative. So, of course, this simple average price relative is always written in an abbreviation form or abbreviated form as SAPR. We are going to pay attention here. This is SAPI, this is SAPR. The only difference here is the presence of I here and then the presence of R here. That's the only difference. So the question becomes, how do we express this one mathematically like we did in the first one? It is given as, we have what we call sum, then open a bracket, we have what? P of Ni all over P of 0I, close the bracket, multiply by 100 all over capital N. I will explain what we owe. Let me call it up here because it seems you are not seeing the board from there. Let me call up the formula here. The formula I wrote here, which you could not see, is that our SAPR is given as sum, open a bracket of P of Ni all over P of 0I multiplied by 100 all over capital N. This is over I. That is the formula of the simple average price relative. Please pay attention because this formula looks familiar to this formula, but they are different. Here, the numerator carries sum, the denominator carries sum. But if you come here, it is only one sum that is used, and that sum is in the numerator. What in the denominator is the total N, talking about the total number of items or commodities that are under discussion. So this and this are quite different. That is what we talk about the simple average price relative. We are going to take a class where all we should be doing there is taking real life example and then trying to obtain our price relative our simple aggregate price index, and our simple average price index. So permit me to clean here. Let us now call weighted and try to look at some of the examples of the index number existing under weighted price index. So permit me to clean these ones. Okay, so we now have what we call the weighted price index. Weighted price index. Yes. And then when we talk about weighted, let us understand that here, what we mean by using weight here is to assign relevance to the different commodities. If you come to a society, you might find out that either biscuit is more value than what than chewing gum. So we are now trying to use weight now to represent the value of these commodities. That's actually what we mean by weighted here. Trying to now use a weight to represent the significance of these different commodities that are under consideration or that are being used to compute the value of an index number. Okay, so under this weighted price index now, there are different formulas that one can use to obtain the price weighted index, or what we call weighted price index. Number one of them is the one propounded by a person we call the last pair. So number one, we have what we call the last pair, the last pairs index number, price index. Price index. It is always written as a PLPI. This is how you usually see it in the textbook, LPI. It is referring to last pair price index number. Then we now have the number 2, or before I write that number 2, let us discuss the last pair. Last pair is, in his own formula, is trying to use the quantity of the commodities in the given year to be what is used as the weighting parameters. The weighting what? Parameters. That is to say that it is saying that the last pair LPI is given as sum over what? Over I. Then I have what we call of my P of Ni or P of N. Then you have Q of what? Of N. All over what? You have sum of P of 0 of Q of N multiplied by 100 over 1. Okay? Here, of course, should be 0. Here, of course, should be what? 0. So in this case now, look at the price which of course we know in the given year. Look at now the price which we know in the base year. So the only difference existing here is, if you watch here you have Q0 multiplying the Pn. If you watch here you have Q0 multiplying the what? The Pn. So here, the quantity of the commodity as the base year is being used as the weight to multiply the price in the given year and equally multiply the price in the what? In the base year. So when questions is asked about what is the parameter or the weighting parameter in the last pair's price index, it is the quantity of the commodity in the base year. Okay? Now, when we talk about number two is talking about the purchase. Okay? The purchase price index. Price index, which is often written as PPI. So in this PPI, of course, it is given as that PPI is given as sum of P of N of Q of N all over what? Sum of P of what? 0, Q of N multiplied by 100 over 1. So in this case now, is using the quantity in the given year, which is Q subscript n, to be the weighting parameter being used to multiply the price in the given year and then the price in the base year. So that is about the last year and that is about the purchase price index. Permit me now to clean here and talk about what we call the Fisher's real price index or Fisher's ideal price index. Fisher's ideal price index. So permit me to clean this place. So when we talk about the Fisher's ideal price index, Fisher's, that is number 3. Fisher's ideal price index, always written as FIPI, Fisher's ideal price index. The concern here is that in as much as the interest is to measure the price index, and in the last year is using the quantity in the base year as a weighting parameter. The Apache is using the quantity in the given year as a weighting parameter. Which one becomes correct? Which one becomes what wrong? None of them is correct. Sorry, none of them is what is wrong. But then, each and every one of them have shortcomings. And then this man is trying to reconcile the two formulas now in order to address their shortcomings. And that's the reason why he's using the word here, ideal price index. So it is the geometric what product of the last pair and then that of the patches. And then that's the reason why the F, the formula for what? For F, I, P, I is given as the square root of the L, P, I multiplied by the P, P, I. The square root of that of last pair and that of the patches will actually give you what is called the Fisher's price index number. Like I had earlier said, writing this formula all this way alone is actually not going to be what is going to solve the problem. We are equally going to take real life examples and solve under them. But then we are going to have a separate class for it in order to manage the size of this video. This is just a kind of introduction into an index number. So permit me to clean here. Let us discuss the relevance or the importance or the advantages of index number to either a business person or to either the government. Why do we think that index number is relevant or important? So which we talk about the importance or advantages. Importance. Some can say advantages of index number. Index number. Okay, number 1. Of course, like we already know, if you are talking about the price of a commodity being 10 naira in 2000 and what, in 2000, and now you are saying that the price of it has gone up to 50 naira in this 2025. And we are now trying to obtain what we call the price index, which is the percentage change in the price of this commodity called the chewing gum over this period of what time. The moment you calculate that percentage, it will be able to tell you the changes in the price of a commodity, which some people always say that it tracks the changes in the price of commodities. Number 1, it tracks. It helps to track the changes in the price of commodities. Of what? Commodities. Okay? And then it will be able to tell you if the price of commodity is increasing or if the price of commodity is decreasing. Another thing we need to know is this: the moment the price of commodity in a society goes up, it affects everything. It affects the purchasing powers of what? Of people. And because it has affected the purchasing powers of people, these people will raise agitation to the government of what? Of the country. And then by raising alarm to the government of the government will intervene by adjusting their wages. Okay? So you now see why people say that the index number helps the government in policy making. This policy making is in inflation adjustment, in wage negotiation, and then to see changes in the what? In the economy. So number two, we talk about. Number two, it helps government. It helps government in policy making. Policy making. And this policy making is in terms of a inflation adjustment. Inflation adjustment. Number two, wage negotiation. Wage negotiation or wages negotiation, etc. So it helps us to do all of this and the rest of them. What else again do we think that price index help or index number helps us? It equally helps us how a particular economy functions or the growth within a particular economy. How do we mean by this? Assuming we are talking about the quantity index, where somebody is saying that in 2000, then about 30 bags of a particular species of a commodity is manufactured. And then in the 2025 now, you are equally telling us now a particular number of bags. One will be able to see if the economy is growing or if that economy is not growing. So it helps to measure the growth in an economy. Number three, it helps to measure the growth in an economy. So these are some of, there are still numerous other use of index numbers, but these are some of them. We have just had an introduction into index number. The next class we are going to have, our interest is how can we, using a data set, be able to compute various indexes of index numbers. So stay tuned and wait for the next class as you are going to benefit from it. But don't fail to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you very much for listening.